Welcome to the coldest graveyard on Earth. What really lies beneath the Blood Falls? Welcome back to the Purely Fiction Society. I'm Knowles, your host, and tonight we are descending into the coldest, most isolated, frozen desert on Earth. Angela is an extreme environment glaciologist who maps the deep hidden waters beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Settle in. This is the tomb beneath the Blood Falls. The McMurdo Dry Valleys of Antarctica are a landscape of absolute desolation, swept by freezing desert winds that exceed 200 kilometers an hour. This frozen desert is one of the few places on the continent entirely devoid of snow. It's a world exposed, black rock, massive dolerite cliffs, and wind-carved granite. Walking through the Taylor Valley feels like walking through a graveyard of the ancient world. The valley floor is littered with mummified, sandblasted remains of seals that wandered inland centuries ago and were preserved perfectly by the sterile freezing air. At the tongue of the massive Taylor Glacier, the stark white of the ice is violently interrupted. A 5-story waterfall pours intermittently from a deep fissure, staining the frozen expanse below in a shocking, brilliant shade of crimson. To science, Blood Falls is merely a subglacial pool of ancient seawater, trapped 3 million years ago, where isolated bacteria survived in total darkness by feeding on the iron of the underlying bedrock. But to Angela, the crimson tide is a sign that a century-old mystery is finally leaking out of the earth. Angela wiped the frost from her goggles as she checked the pressure gauges on her heavy subglacial cordial. She was a practical woman, used to harsh environments and tough, lonely work. She had been hired by a polar research station to drill monitoring shafts into the hypersaline lake trapped 400 meters beneath the ice sheet. A reservoir completely isolated from the world. But Angela had a private reason for taking the contract. In her kit bag was an old faded diary belonging to her grandfather, a logistics transport rider who had joined Robert Falkner Scott's 1910 Terra Nova expedition. The final entry spoke of a secret British scouting team led by a man named Matthew Connor. Connor's team had broken away into the dry valleys, carrying a heavy, unmarked iron chest stolen from a uncharted Ptolemaic temple near the ancient Egyptian port of Bernike. The diary claimed that the text on the temple walls described a relic so dangerous to the balance of the ancient world that it had to be banished to the end of the earth, where the freezing, sterile conditions of the eternal ice would preserve and hide it forever. For weeks, Angela had endured the biting polar cold, tracking the exact coordinates where Matthew Connor's team had vanished from the expedition logs. The surface of the Taylor Glacier offered no clues, just a vast expanse of unyielding ice that cracked and groaned under its own immense weight. The rest of the scientific team saw only a routine geological study, completely unaware of the historical anomaly sleeping right beneath their boots. Angela knew she was running out of time. Before the polar winter set in, forcing her to pack up her gear and leave the frozen valley, empty-handed, she pushed the drilling equipment to its absolute limits, praying that her great-grandfather's frantic diary notes were accurate. The drill rig suddenly shuddered violently, the metal diamond bit hitting a massive pocket of pressurized water far earlier than the geological charts predicted. The ice beneath Angela's boots groaned, a deep structural crack tearing open along the face of the glacier. The water at the mouth of the falls began to bubble, turning from a clear liquid to a thick, dark red as the ancient iron hit the open air. The shifting ice had opened a temporary vertical conduit directly into the subterranean lake. The sound was deafening, a roaring echo of rushing water and grinding ice that shook the bedrock of the entire valley. Angela checked the telemetry and knew the immense weight of the moving glacier would grind this fissure shut within an hour. Seizing the only chance she would ever get, she buckled on her heavy safety harness, switched on a high-powered light, and lowered herself directly into the freezing narrow chasm. The air grew instantly thick with a dense freezing mist that blinded her vision, forcing her to rely entirely on the tension of her climbing rope as she descended into the unknown. Descending into the heart of the Taylor Glacier was like entering a narrow tomb of solid blue glass. She dropped 400 meters down, her dry suit scraping against the slick walls, fighting the upward rush of the buoyant salt water. The pressure in her ears grew intense, and the cold seemed to seep through her thermal layers, turning every movement into a painful struggle. At the very bottom, the shaft opened into a massive pitch-black cavern where the ancient water table met the continental bedrock. Angela's boots touched the solid ground, sweeping her light across the cave floor. She froze. She wasn't looking at a natural rock. Resting in the center of the subterranean vault was a massive ancient stone sarcophagus, built from blocks of heavy black basalt and belonged in North Africa, not the polar ice. Sitting right next to it were the frozen, perfectly preserved remains of the 1910 British scouting team, their vintage woolen coats stiffened by a century of salt and ice. At the front of the group sat Matthew Connor, his dead hands frozen around the primary iron seal of the vault, his face an expressionless mask of stone-cold dedication. Angela slowly swept her flashlight around the enormous chamber. The walls were not rough glacial ice or fractured bedrock, but smooth towering slabs of black basalt, fitted together with impossible precision. Deeply carved symbols spiraled across the stone, their meaning erased by thousands of years of slow-moving ice. Yet their craftsmanship remained untouched. Massive square pillars disappeared into the darkness above, supporting a ceiling that should never have existed beneath Antarctica. The freezing cavern did not feel like a tomb built by desperate men. It felt like an ancient sanctuary that had been waiting in absolute silence long before the first human footsteps ever crossed the frozen continent. Angela approached the tomb, her heart hammering against her ribs. The absolute silence of the underground vault was terrifying, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing inside her helmet. She used a heavy iron crowbar to carefully lever up the cracked stone lid of the sarcophagus, the ancient rocks scraping together with a sharp, echoing groan. Inside there were no gold or glittering jewelry. Resting on a bed of dry linen was a single massive bronze tablet, completely untouched by time. Carved deep into the metal was a beautifully preserved astrolabe map of the ancient world, showing trade routes, sea currents, and lost coastal cities that predated the pharaohs, a priceless blueprint of human history that the world believed was lost forever. Angela stared at the artifact, her flashlight beam illuminating precise, forgotten details of an era before written records. She realized the terrible weight of what Matthew Connor and his men had hidden here. If this tablet was brought to the surface, it would rewrite human history, spark bitter international fights over the territory, and destroy the peace of the untouched continent. It was a treasure too heavy for the modern world to carry, an open invitation for greed and conflict to tear apart the last pristine wilderness on Earth. Suddenly a deafening crack echoed through the vaults and rattled the ice above. The glacier was shifting its weight, the temporary pressure valve closing. Tons of solid ice began to grind inward, the narrow conduit threatening to snap shut and trap her in the dark forever. Dust and sharp fragments of frozen glass rained down from the ceiling, shattering on the stone floor around her. Angela did not try to lift the bronze. She lowered the heavy basalt lid back into place, sealing the tablet back in the dark where it belonged, right beside Matthew Connor and the men who had died to protect it. She apologized in a quiet whisper to the frozen explorers, honoring the sacrifice they had made over a century ago to keep the world safe from its own curiosity. She grabbed her ascent rope and climbed up into the narrowing vertical shaft. The climb was a brutal race against time and gravity. The freezing brine rushed past her ears, the ice walls pressing closer against her shoulders with every passing second. Her muscles screamed with exhaustion as she clawed her way upwards, the walls of the conduit physically shifting and shrinking around her. Angela scrambled through the final bottleneck at the surface just as the glacier delivered a final grounding shudder. Behind her, the fissure snapped shut with a deafening thud, completely sealing the conduit and severing the link to the deep tomb below. She collapsed onto the dry gravel of the valley, gasping for air in the freezing wind. Below her, the crimson waters of Blood Falls slowed to a deep, dull seep, covering the secret in a rust-colored stain. Angela unbuckled her gear, walked over to the main computer terminal, and deleted the drilling depth log. She replaced them with a report stating that the drill had hit solid bedrock and failed, ensuring that no future research team would ever attempt to puncture the ice at these coordinates again. The secret of the dry valleys would remain buried beneath 400 meters of ice, safe with the history it protected. Some secrets are meant to stay in the dark. Angela turns her back to the bleeding glacier and begins the long trek back to the research camp, knowing the true history of the ancient world is safe for another millennium. Thank you for listening to tonight's tale from the Purely Fiction Society. If Angela's journey into the frozen depths of the dry valleys gripped you tonight, please hit the like button and share your thoughts on her choice to leave the ancient tablet undisturbed in the comments below. To ensure you never miss our next standalone adventure, make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on. Until next time, don't stop believing. Good night.